Magandang araw po sa inyo. Ito po si Kim Bernardo Lokin at ito ang Diretsong Pananaw. Ngayong araw na ito, makakasama po natin ang business columnist ng The Manila Times na si Mr. Ben Kritz. Good morning, Ben.
Magandang araw, and that may be the extent of my Tagalog, but good morning to you too. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, so good to hear that you've been practicing on your Tagalog lately, Ben. Today, we're gonna have to discuss the issues, economic issues mostly, or business issues surrounding the elections, right? So, I mean, at this point, we are on alert level 2. That's Metro Manila. That's been downgraded to alert level 2. So that means some businesses, some more businesses have opened, and a lot more people are coming out. So tell me, what does this mean? Does this mean that we're finally hoping to jumpstart our economy?
Well, I think so. I think that's what everybody's hoping. And I know I have, and a lot of people that I've talked to have also expressed this apprehension that we don't want to see, we really don't want to see another big setback as far as the pandemic is concerned. As you know, right now, China is experiencing another serious outbreak, and there are some problems in some countries in Europe. So we're really hoping that it doesn't, that it doesn't come to that, because it's been so long and we are so tired and fallen so far behind that we really want this to be over. And as far as that goes, that really comes down to the vaccination program. I think the relative openness we're seeing now is a result of that, and that's good, and that's a credit to even though they got off to a slow start, that is a credit to the government, and especially the local governments, and carrying that out, getting us to this point. And they just have to keep up that momentum so that we can avoid that, that setback that everybody's kind of afraid will happen, with so many people out and about and getting back to their activities.
I know.
We want it to stay that way.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit shocking for all of us here in Metro Manila, because I mean, this is probably the first time we've been seeing this kind of crowd outside, and it's not only in the malls, and it's outside too. And it also means that it's gonna be a difficult task for the next president of the Philippines, because election is just like how many more months away, right? So maybe we digress a little bit. How do you campaign in this type of an election? And what do you think are the main issues that a candidate for president has to look to and has to explain to the people? Ben?
Well, okay, there's a difference between, from what I see, there's a difference between what should be the main issues and what may end up being, the things that attract everyone's attention. I believe that the main issues are obviously finally putting the pandemic to rest, because until we have full control over that, we cannot do anything with the economy. Second, having an economic recovery plan to put the country back on its previous track where we left off at the end of 2019. I think it's going to take at least the rest of this year, and obviously, and probably all of next year. We may start seeing some progress in 2023, but there needs to be a plan for that, and that needs to take into account some of the things we're seeing globally right now, the supply chain issues, the volatile oil prices.
That's right.
We need to be prepared for those kind of things. And the other big issue, which kind of is over all of this, is the environment, which has been brought to the forefront with the COP26. Climate change response is going to need to be a part of almost every policy that the next administration comes up with, regardless whether it's economic or education or healthcare, infrastructure development, and everything is going to have to take that into account much more so than it has in the past. Now, whether those are the things that will really resonate with people, I don't know. I think people's main concern are more bread and butter issues. People have suffered a lot
Yeah.
in almost 2 years of the pandemic, and they want to know how they're going to get back to being able to not having to worry about feeding their family and keeping a roof over their head.
Well, yeah,
You know, so
that's really basic. Yeah, I know.
yeah,
I
so
can understand.
I think the candidates who can best address those very simple concerns, you know, are going to be the most successful. However, they're also going to need to be able to address the bigger concerns so that they can get the support of the business community and, you know, local government leaders and the things that really, you know, help the machine go. You know, so
Okay.
it's got to be a balance between both.
Right. Okay. Now that you mentioned the candidates, Ben, let's take a look at them. Or, you know, from what we see or read in the articles, social media, and the papers, right? So, from among the candidates, what do you think? Has any one of them, or almost all of them, of the presidential candidates, have tried to address the issue? Or are we still going to wait for them to actually say what it is, at least at this point, right? I know it's too early, but yeah.
Well, in the past couple of weeks or few days, really, I am starting to hear. I'm starting to hear a lot more. I mean, nobody has come up with a concrete plan yet. You know, presented a platform, so to speak, but some of them are starting to address, you know, the issues piecemeal, and that's good.
Mhm.
You know, I hope they do more of that and you know, give us some more details rather than some of the typical shenanigans that, you know, have been going on and that we always expect in elections, you know, not only in this country too. I mean, yeah, I have
Right.
another whole circus to pay attention to in the US. So you're not unique, but yeah, we want to hear, you know, and they don't have to, you know, they don't have to agree, and there may not be any right answer, you know, but
Mhm.
let's hear some different ideas and give people something to think about and discuss. That's, you know, that's how choices are best made.
Right, that's true. So basically, I think it's a matter of trying to tailor fit these issues that you just have
Mhm.
mentioned, like the environment, economic recovery plan, and of course, like, you know, how do we prevent, like, you know, the pandemic from, you know, going again, because people
Mhm.
are out now. So yeah, so maybe, you know, a tailor fit, right? But for example, if you were, you know, if you were looking or vetting these presidential candidates, what would you like, or what would you hope to hear from when we say, how do we jumpstart the economy? What would be, I mean, there's two sides of this one.
Mhm.
And because we're looking at it from like how we look at it, and then second is the masses, because as you know, the Philippines is like, you know, they are more voting population in the provinces than in the urban areas, right? So
Right.
they might have different concerns. So, I mean, from your point of view, what would you be looking at? I mean, when you say, for example, like economic recovery plan, I mean, everybody wants that. Everybody
Mhm.
probably has a plan in mind. But do you have anything specific that you
Yeah.
think that, you know?
Well, yeah, I understand that. I understand your question.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's hard to think of things on such a grand scale. You know, because we don't manage ourselves and our households that way.
Sure.
So the things that me personally, and bear in mind, this is just an opinion of someone who doesn't vote, and so I'm kind of taking an objective view towards all of this. What I would want to hear, you know, in terms of, you know, jumpstarting the economy, what I would want to hear from the candidates is, number one, job creation.
Mhm.
You know, how you're going to, which because it, you know, encourage more businesses to open and expand and create jobs. Number two, energy. Energy
Mhm.
is a perennial difficulty here, and we need to start accelerating the energy transition away from coal and other imported fuel into more
Sure.
sustainable energy. So number two would be energy, and number three would be mobility. That has also been, and we feel it more here in Metro Manila than you do in other parts of the country. But you
Mhm.
know, it's not a problem just for this, you know, for this city. You know, you need to improve, you know, improve people's ability to move around, people's ability to move goods to market. You know, to travel from one end of the country to the other, and you know, so I would like to hear, infrastructure, you know, infrastructure plans, because that's what that's going to fall into. But I want to hear infrastructure plans about how to move people instead of how to move cars. Um, that's something that's been missing for a long
Right.
time.
So you're
You know,
talking about the mass transport system, right?
yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's a number of answers to that, and sometimes that doesn't even involve building mass transit. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes that involves, you know, setting up carpool lanes, extending the bike lane network.
Probably not in a
Um,
pandemic for the carpooling, Ben. Maybe that's kind of difficult right now. Maybe
mhm.
after the pandemic, right? So
Yeah,
because
well,
I think they're trying to create a bubble, so you gotta like, maybe
mhm,
carpool only with the ones and those, and that's kind of hard.
yeah, make the existing, you know, bus and jeepney network more efficient. Um,
Right.
you know, service contracting is one idea that's brought up. You know, improve the livelihood for those people so that they can have a more efficient network.
Mhm.
Build more trains. You know, build more bike lanes. Lots of people have taken up, you know, bicycling, or particularly here in the city. You can get
That's
around a lot.
true.
You can get around a lot faster on a bicycle than you can a car, and it's a completely zero cost to the environment. So put bike lanes everywhere. You know, the answer to congestion is not to build more roads. You know, the answer to congestion is to figure out how to move those people that are stuck in traffic. You know, how to let them move despite the traffic, because you know the cars aren't the ones that do the jobs and buy the things in the store, you know, and support businesses. It's the people that do that. So figure out how to move the people.
Mhm. That
Yeah, and I hear a plan like that, and I'm gonna think pretty favorably of that candidate, whoever it is.
Okay, yeah, that's probably one of the main priorities.
Mm-hmm.
That has been anyway. I mean, especially if you live in like the urban areas like Metro Manila or even Metro Cebu, because traffic there is really a big problem too, right? Okay,
Right.
you mentioned about jobs creation, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
So currently our latest figures have seen us to an unemployment of about over 4 million. So if you were a candidate, how do we deal with this? What do you think should be the right way to address this issue?
Um, I think the right way to address that issue is to make an environment, you know, that supports entrepreneurs
Mhm.
more so than it does now, because it's a the you know, the stock answer that we've heard for years and years and years, not just through this administration, but you know, in years past, is okay, well, now we're going to do these big infrastructure projects and it'll create jobs. Yeah,
Mhm.
well, the way jobs are created, you know, in a country where 99% of the business enterprises are MSMEs,
Mhm.
you know, is when there's more MSMEs, you know, created. Um, you know, a person who is able to put up a little online business, you know, they've just created a job, and maybe they get busy and they hire, a helper from the neighborhood. There you go. And you have to do it a little bit at a time. And I don't think that programs such as skills retraining, and these things that they talk about, that helps. But what it really comes down to is, make an enabling environment for business.
Okay.
Primarily domestic, but also make it attractive for, possibly foreign investors to come in too, because whenever you let businesses establish themselves or expand, that's when the jobs are created. And
Okay.
all variety of jobs are created. So you don't have to worry about trying to train people for different things or whatever. They could pick something they already know how to do or can learn.
Right. Okay. So, since you mentioned about, businesses already, I mean, we have seen some of the industries here in the Philippines move ahead than farther than the others, and then we've seen a lot of setback, especially during the pandemic, right? So, I mean, one of the brightest stars that we were looking at before the pandemic were the BPOs, right? And then, of course, I don't know, controversial ones are like, the Pogo, and they've long since gone. I mean, there's only like a little sprinkling left here, right? So what about them? The industries, are we attracting the right industries? Well, the BPO for sure, yes. And what type of businesses should we be targeting at? And then what do you think from the point of view of foreign investors? What do you think is like, keeping them from actually, pouring more investments into the country than, let's say, our other Asian neighbors, like let's say Vietnam, etc.?
Well, how much time do we have?
Well, I can give you the whole hour actually,
yeah.
Ben. Yeah, but yeah, so let's not go
Okay.
to town. Like,
All right, let's take these a little bit, one at a time here. And bear in mind, a part of my impressions are formed by several months worth of listening to experts we've had on our regular online forums. So there's been a lot of views and a lot of good brains thinking about these problems in this country. That's encouraging. As far as businesses go, I think that this pandemic has given us a lesson that there really needs to be kind of a shift in the priorities here. Businesses that are extremely vulnerable to shocks like a pandemic, or to require people moving around. The tourism industry, number one.
Okay.
I mean, tourism is still an important industry. We still have, great resources for tourism here, but that needs to be deprioritized a little bit, because that's a risky sector. And I mean, they suffered badly. Same goes with like the hospitality industry. I think the BPOs have come out rather well. And there's a shift in this country towards, higher level BPO work. And I think if government policy supports that evolution, that development towards the higher value added services, that's attractive to foreign investors, because we still have a pretty attractive workforce as far as that's concerned. Pogos, that needs to just go.
Well, they've already been gone. There's just a sprinkling left right now.
Yeah, that is a complete dead end. And that's another industry that's very sensitive to economic shocks. But the main problem with that is China wants that to go, and the Chinese government will find a way to put it into it. And so we should cut our losses, and not encourage that anymore.
Right. Okay. I mean, looking at that, it actually, I think, we already have gone past that first step, because
I think it's pretty well. I think
Right.
it's pretty
But
well dead, but leave it that way.
right, but Ben,
Yeah.
I think one of the collateral damage on when the Pogos left is the corporate spaces, real estate sector, especially
Mhm.
in urban areas. I mean,
Right.
look at the vacancy rates here in Metro Manila, right? So we have gone, building so many new buildings, so
Mhm.
many new corporate and office spaces in the last few years. We've seen all of that, bright new sparkling buildings all over the place. And now, how much of those are actually still being rented out? Because there was a time when the Pogos were so huge that they would like buy or rent the whole building and then they
Mhm.
pay for a whole year and all. And we don't see that anymore. And I don't think we can get that same kind of like spike in the rentals or getting the office
No.
spaces from the local
Yeah.
businesses,
No.
right? So how do
We
you
we we can't, and we're probably not going to attract enough, outside investment to take it up. As hard as it is, and I know people in the real estate industry, and they,
yeah.
trying to be upbeat about it, but what we've witnessed a bubble bursting,
Hmm.
quite frankly, and there we're not going to fill that space again. Um, maybe over a
Not
long
in.
period, yeah, no, maybe over a long period of time, as people
Mhm.
think of ways to repurpose it. Um, and some of the expansion of the BPO sector will help. Um, some of the shift towards digital business, that will help a bit. But yeah, that's there's gonna be some damage that's not going to be repaired from that. I mean, that created a real estate bubble, despite everyone saying no, it's not a bubble. That's exactly
Mhm.
what it was, and it popped because of the pandemic, and that's just the way it goes.
That's true. Okay,
Mhm.
so moving on to one of the most sensitive issues right now in this pandemic, the health sector.
Mhm.
So we have seen not only the way that our pandemic, COVID-19 is being handled here, the strategies that the government has employed. And you can actually compare it with, the neighboring countries, right? So at the end of the day, everybody seems to agree that while we are trying our best, it's just not enough. I mean,
Mhm.
we are really so low down in like the list of like those that that would recover faster, and it's not just the vaccine rollout. So how do you think this will pan out? I mean, in the coming elections, and does this need to be a big priority during the campaign right now? Because when you go to the provinces, they don't care about like office spaces and all of those. They would probably look into agriculture
Mhm.
because that's what's happening there. Also this health sector, right?
Yes,
And then the
exactly.
third, yeah, and then the third one is what is this? The dole outs, the government dole outs. So what are your thoughts on this, Ben?
Well, the handling of the pandemic. I mean, there was a lot that's gone wrong, and a lot of, I think, the wrong priorities in it. It could have been worse.
Okay,
I mean, we have not had the greatest experience, but we've certainly not had the worst.
I
Uh,
agree. Yes.
so they did do some things right. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the vaccine program now seems to be working pretty well, and that
Mhm.
is
Yes.
really important, and that's very encouraging. They need to keep that up. They need to work on getting those out into the provinces and the more remote areas.
Mhm.
Um, but I think they're aware of that, and they could do that. Um, but the thing with this pandemic is it's also a warning to us that this will happen again. Um, it's not a if, it's a when. and maybe it won't be as bad the next time, but pandemics happen all the time, and we're going to need to deal with it. I think that the investment in the healthcare infrastructure
Mhm.
needs to be massively increased.
Okay,
So
I agree.
there are capable facilities available to everyone, no matter where they are in the country, and the investment in the healthcare people, at this point is just it's appalling. It's a national embarrassment. Um, you should not have people resigning and complaining that they've gone months without receiving their hazard pay, and fighting to get a decent wage. It's just it's atrocious, and that's not ever been properly addressed throughout this pandemic, and I don't know why. That should have been the most obvious thing, is
That's right.
you can't
Right.
manage this pandemic unless you have competent people that can do the work. So that's your number one thing. You make sure you have enough people and you take care of them, because you need them, and they haven't done that. And that is something that is going to resonate with people if one of the candidates say, look, this is what I intend to do to take care of our healthcare workers, because for all of the lip service that they give them about them being the frontline heroes and everything, it treated them terribly.
Mhm.
And
I
it's not right, and it needs to be fixed.
At magbabalik po ang diretsong pananaw, diyan lamang po kayo. Okay, I agree with you. That should be one of the top priorities, the healthcare infrastructure, as you mentioned, right? So, and the whole system, and especially the people, right? You got to take care of the people. I
Right.
agree with you, because this has been, and this one will resonate whether you're in the city or you're in the provinces, right?
Yes.
Because it's one of those things that people will always have to ask you. So I agree with you on that. So let's talk about agriculture, Ben. I mean, obviously this is somehow tied to the environment, because agriculture and the environment, you can't talk about one without going to the other too. So
Mhm.
they kind of tie in together. So do you agree that at this point we still need to look at agriculture, or tap agriculture more as a way to economic recovery, rather than, because we are a consumer-based society. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody has a wage, everybody's like waiting for their salaries and all that, but we are very weak on the manufacturing, we are very weak on the agriculture, right? So now I'm talking about agriculture, especially because this one would probably resonate also, just like the
Mhm.
health issue, for the whole of the Philippines. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, yes. Agriculture is still the biggest employer in this country, um, and will be for a long time. And everybody needs food. And I know one of the big goals that's always been expressed is food self-sufficiency. Um, and I don't know that that's necessarily needed. But what we need to do is make our agriculture productive.
Mhm.
Um,
More productive, right?
right.
Because
And
I mean, it doesn't.
that's and there's different ways to approach that, but we need to get the maximum productivity out of the land, the maximum efficiency in moving those goods to the markets for it. And if we need to import things, we need to import things. But I tell you what, more efficient you are, the less you need to import. Um,
So
and
because now that we have more importation than ever, what does that tell us?
yeah, that's that we're falling down on the productivity. I mean, you look at a country like you look at I'm not exactly sure what the current figures are, but over the past several years, a country like Thailand, um, they're just their rice sector. They're like 3 times more productive per hectare than the
Mhm.
Philippines is. Even South Korea, which has seasonal weather,
Mhm.
is more productive on a on a per capita basis than the Philippines is. Um,
So that
yeah,
means
so yeah,
we need to focus more on
mhm.
this particular
Yeah,
one.
yeah. Just for the sake of providing consumer goods, feeding this country's massive appetite,
Mhm.
the livelihood for the farming sector, because let's face it, if it's not an attractive line of work, it's not going to exist for very long.
Mhm.
Um, and the agriculture sector is really the frontliners in the in the response to climate change. Um, so a lot of our goals towards sustainability can be achieved through taking care of agriculture. So just like the healthcare sector, I think there needs to be a massive a massive priority and money spent on that.
Right. So you mentioned about the environment, and yeah, there's the ongoing conference on the COP26, right, on the
Mhm.
environment. So everybody's talking about it, right? Everybody's like saying like their own call to action kind of thing. So in here right now, our present batch of presidential candidates, have you actually heard any of them right now talk about these things, which obviously is a global concern? And we didn't even like send a representative, I understand, to that conference, but yeah, I mean, that's water under the bridge. But have you seen the next batch of candidates like talk about the environment like this, the way it should be?
No, no. Oh well, one thing, just something you mentioned, just to say that, because I've heard other people, um, kind of complain about it. Yes, we did send a delegation to the
Oh, we
COP,
did.
led
Okay.
by Secretary Dominguez, who,
Okay.
besides being the finance secretary, is also the chair of the Climate Change Commission.
I see.
So
Okay.
we sent I commented on it in one of my columns. We actually sent a pretty good delegation,
Okay. Okay.
of finance, environment, infrastructure, and foreign affairs people.
Mm-hmm.
Just the sort of people you need if you're going to try to work out some deals. Yeah, so that was good. I was happy with the government's response to the
I
conference
see. Okay.
itself.
Okay.
Um, as far as what the candidates are saying, no, we're still getting a lot of the, yeah. I mean, they're acknowledging that, yeah, climate is something we should worry about, but nobody has a plan. I mean, they're just, it's a lot of the calls to action and things like that. I'm sorry, at this point, we're beyond that. It's not. We don't need to call to action. We need to know what the action is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right. And we haven't heard it at this
No, we
point,
have
right?
not heard that at all. And that's disappointing, but all we can do is kind of keep poking them and keep asking the question and make them come up with something, because they can't avoid that. I mean, that affects everybody, regardless if you're an urban voter or a rural voter, or what your job is. I mean, that's a concern. And
I understand. Yes, I
yeah.
understand. Okay, so moving to one of those things, because I'm actually trying to list down the points that you're making so I don't forget them, right? But one of the things that we've been talking about, okay, so economic recovery. Do you think that right now government is providing enough financial stimulus during this pandemic? And if you were like, um, to try to listen to the presidential candidates, what are you hoping to hear?
Um, it's a little bit, tough because by the time one of these people will be elected, we're going to be beyond the point. I hope we're going to be beyond the point where direct assistance either to households or even to businesses is going to be really much of an issue.
Mhm.
Um, I think compared with other countries, um, I think the Philippines has been rather low, in terms of direct assistance,
Mhm.
throughout the pandemic. I think comparing with other countries is a bit invidious, because it's the situations differ. But if the even if this is better than some countries, if it's still an unsatisfying situation here, then it's still a problem.
Mhm.
Uh, benchmarking only goes so far.
Right.
I
So,
Yeah, I think what they can do rather than just the idea of handing out ayuda. um I I'm hesitant to agree with that because I think that's a very short term, a very short term benefit. What I think they can do is they can look at giving people more tax breaks, um, perhaps making some, it will require some legislation, but perhaps making some modifications to, you know, um, certain excise taxes, consumption type taxes that really hit people's pockets.
mhm.
Um, not just throw them out, but take a look at, what do they really need, and where can they get revenue in a less painful way for the population. Um, and again, I think if there is some kind of direct assistance, rather than going to families, it should go to businesses, particularly smaller businesses. Um, because helping a business stay afloat, you know, uh, not only helps that business, that gives consumers a place to spend their money, that gives a place for people to be employed, that's a link in a supply chain, that can, that can prosper from it, more bang for the buck doing it that way. So something like that. And I think they have to consider some kind of support or incentive for small businesses, because a lot of them, they point to the reduction in the corporate income tax rates. Well, a lot of them, fall below that bar. Um,
That's right. Yeah.
so they're not gonna enjoy those benefits. So they need to do something for that, because as we know, that's the biggest part of the economy. Um, so address their needs, keep these people in business, and encourage other people to go into business.
That's
Um,
right. So, because in this country right now, we are still not, of the entrepreneurial type, where what we can see largely are still like employees, right?
mhm.
Employees of corporations, of the public sector, the government, and everything like that. So I think there has to be a policy for, like, to help in the shift um, into trying to make the Filipinos more entrepreneurial, and probably helping more push the MSMEs, as,
Yeah.
as a
Well,
way.
there's really a big gulf, isn't there? I mean, you have the bigger businesses, that employ a lot of people, and you
Mhm.
have this big empty space, and then you have the small people, the
Right.
person who will put up a little barbecue stand or have a little sari store or something like that.
Hmm.
And there's not, people are not entrepreneurial in that big space in between, and that's where things are really productive. Um, so you need to kind of focus on the, on that part of it somewhat. The businesses that can get started and employ 4 or 5 people.
Right. But when you look at government, there always is the presence of like a push for small livelihood programs,
Mhm.
especially in the
Yeah.
provinces. But, I mean, how can we take this a little, one step further? Because
Mhm.
what is happening is that we've always had these, but apparently, like, it doesn't seem to work well. You
No.
can only try to jumpstart at the time.
Yeah,
It's always
that
there.
that's not that's not encouraging entrepreneurship. That's encouraging subsistence.
Mhm,
Um, that sounds harsh, but that's what it is. Excuse me. Um,
mhm,
you help somebody with these micro entrepreneurial programs, and you've
mhm.
created one job for that one person. Um, and they they may earn enough for their household consumption, but there's no there's no value add. It doesn't extend, that it doesn't spread the benefits throughout the rest of the economy.
So, what do you think is needed then? I mean, the government has been looking at it that way for the longest time, try to help, give some livelihood to this person so that, that person can probably help his family, right? And then,
Mhm.
in the hope that, because you spread it out, then at least you know that these people are not going to go hungry, right? Or at least temporarily. So, what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think I don't, there's probably a lot of things that could be done, but I think one of the big ones is to make credit and investment more available to potential small entrepreneurs. A person who has the wherewithal to put up a food cart, yeah, if they were able to come up with maybe uh, 100,000 loan,
Mhm.
they may be, they may have the energy to set up something a little bigger. So, improve credit access is one big thing. And I think
Right.
I think the economic policymakers are aware of that. Um, but there's just a lot of inertia within the banking sector in this country, which tends to be very conservative.
Mhm.
Um, and things change very slowly. Yeah, but that would be a big one. Is um, let people take a chance on them, and let them invest and see what they can do. Um,
That's
you
that's
know,
actually, yeah, that's actually the I agree with
mhm,
you, Ben. This is one of the things that we need to address because right now a majority of people are still unbanked, so to speak. So
mhm,
they don't even have a bank account, and much less, there's no credit facility that is open to them, nor are willing to, give these people the break that they need, right?
mhm.
So, but that's a tough one to do. I mean, do you think that, the current batch of presidential candidates would hopefully come up with like an idea or so to be able to bring credit to the people, to those that need it the most, right? Because right now our
Uh,
banks just give out loans to
mhm,
the same batch of corporations and companies and
mhm.
multinationals, the same group, right? So what do we do about that?
Yeah, well, maybe one answer to that is is for government to set up a loan guarantee program.
They have, right? There are
There are
some.
certain programs, but they're not utilized to anywhere near their potential. Um, as far as the current batch of candidates, I haven't really heard anyone that come up with any firm plans on that. And really, that would be something I would be more interested in who they would tap, as their economic team, rather than what the candidate did. I mean, that's
Right.
that was one thing about President Duterte, that I thought worked out really well. Is President Duterte, by his own admission, is no genius when it comes to economics,
Mhm.
but he picked a pretty good team.
Yes, yeah,
in Secretary
I agree.
Dominguez and Governor Joe at the BSP, at the was it the
Okay,
DVM before, so I would be more interested to hear who they would, approach and say, hey, would you handle finance for us? Hey, would you handle DBM? Who's their ideal team? And that would say a lot about what their economic approach would be.
okay,
It may
that's
be too soon for that, though. I
right.
understand.
No, but that's actually a good idea. So,
Mhm.
one of the things that we can do when we look at the presidential candidates is to look at the people around them, right?
Right.
I
Mhm.
mean, that might be a
Yep.
good
That
that
makes the
might be a
big
good strategy.
difference.
Yes, that's true. So, okay, so I think we have pretty much covered a whole range right now,
Mhm.
Ben, and we've actually finished the whole hour discussing all these things. Now, moving on to our like last questions. Where do we go from here then? We are opening up the economy again. Hopefully, we're going to be able to play catch up. And hopefully, we give something a little better than what we have right now to the next president. So, what are your thoughts on this? And how should the people, the Filipinos, look at this towards the remaining months of the Duterte administration?
Well, with an election on the horizon, we really are kind of in a holding pattern. Um, so I think that the remaining months of this year and then up until the election or the inauguration, actually next
Mhm.
year, the first half of next year, um, I think is really going to be trying to really get back to a normal routine of things.
Mhm.
And as much as that can be done safely,
Right.
which is the big key. Continue opening up, letting people get back to work, letting people get back to their normal activities, their normal spending habits, and everything. Um, but do it safely,
Mhm.
and then when the new president is actually sworn in, then we can work on, okay, now this is day one. This is how we're going to build on, we survived this pandemic. Now we can start over again. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Um,
I agree. I agree,
the
Ben.
the idea that, okay, within a relatively short period of time, we're going to be back on track. I've heard that from so many people. I've heard that from, some of the government people. We'll get back on track by mid 2022, or, beginning of 2023. Whatever. No, we're not going back on track. We're going to have to go on a new track.
Okay.
And I think if the new administration comes into it with that mindset, and it doesn't, and I mean that's a positive, that's a positive thing, or it should be. But I think if they come into it with that mindset, we're not trying to recover what we were before. That's gone now. The world is, like it or not, the world is slightly different for us. So let's make the most of what we got from here on out. And I think
Well,
that's the way it should be done.
okay, wise words, Ben. And I think you're right. You know what you also wanted to emphasize was discipline also in terms of the people, right? You
Mhm.
shouldn't like rely on government the whole time. We should be partners in this, for all these recovery and the hopes that we are able to finally regain our lost footing again. It takes two to tango. And yeah, so those are very good things, very
Mhm.
good points that you had mentioned today. And
Yeah.
so it has been a pleasure talking to you, Ben. And next time we will deal with you a little bit in Tagalog. But yeah, thank you very much for being our guest in today's show.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it, and I'd be happy to do it again sometime.
Okay, we'll do that very soon, Ben. At yan po ang aming panauhin ngayong araw na ito, ang ating Manila Times business columnist na si Mr. Ben Kritz. At maraming salamat din po sa inyong lahat. Magbabalik ang Diretsong Pananaw sa susunod na linggo at kasama na po natin dyan si Attorney Alvi Tangkol sa susunod nating episode. At ito po si Kim Bernardo Lokin. Maraming salamat po sa inyo at hanggang sa susunod.